I feel like if you fish a lot, you also drive a lot. Those things just go together. And this video is an example of the kind of things that's rattling around in my head on those long drives. Hey, I'm Ben. I'm a huge fly fisherman, and in today's video we're going to talk about changes. I'm going to talk about how fly fishing has changed, how fisheries changed, and about how my fishing has changed over the last few years. But before I talk about changes, I'm going to talk about Odell Brewing, the sponsor of this video. Odell is an employee-owned craft brewery. I don't know if they know that much about fly fishing, but they're good at making beer. And I'll just be honest, if you're not drinking Odell, you're an idiot. All right, maybe if you're not 21 or if you don't drink alcohol, that's fine. But if you like beer, you should be drinking Odell. Look for it in your bar or your liquor store and give them a swig. Okay, changes. First, let's talk about how fly fishing has changed. And I'm gonna use my frame of reference here, which is like a little over 30 years of fly fishing. First thing I think of is rods. Rods are a lot faster, stronger, and lighter these days. They're also a lot more expensive, in case you haven't noticed. All right, how about waders? When I started fly fishing was like mid-90s, which was right around the time that breathable waders became a thing. They are a great improvement over neoprene. If you're still out there rocking neoprene in the summer, you dumb. Another thing that's changed, and I guess it's an improvement, is welded loops on the end of your fly line. You might not know this, but that didn't always exist, and we had to do something called tying nail knots. Raise your hand if you know how to tie a nail knot. Most of you don't, I'm sure of it. I've probably tied half a dozen nail knots on the end of people's lines this year after their welded loop failed. I carry a nail knot tool. I know how to tie nail knots. They're not that hard. So if you've never learned how to tie a nail knot, learn it, and I guarantee you it will come in handy someday. All right, how about species of fish that we fish for? Things like carp and jack crevalles, they used to be sort of out there, but now they're pretty mainstream. Everybody's catching carp and jacks. It's no big deal anymore. You're not like some pioneer if you're trying to do that these days. Now, how about this one? And this is really probably a video unto itself, but the internet. I'm not gonna go into it, but boy, has that changed fishing. Way easier to find fishing spots now. It's easier to plan fishing trips, easier to find people to go fishing with, easier to get gear, easier to buy flies. It made everything easier. And it also made it a lot more crowded out there. There are definitely a lot more people fly fishing now because of the internet. And that's not a complaint, you know, rising tide floats all ships. The more the merrier, in my opinion. Just don't fish where I'm trying to fish. Simple as that. All right, now let's talk about how fisheries themselves can change. They can change physically, like the riverbed moves around, like runoff changes the shape of the river every year. Rivers and lakes are dynamic. They're always changing. You know, and the ocean is too. A big hurricane comes through and the marsh in Louisiana changes every time. After every storm, there's new debris to rip your lower unit off. You gotta be careful out there. And those are all just natural processes that in a lot of ways rejuvenate and renew fisheries while they're changing them. It keeps them healthy. How about alpine lakes? I think the physical aspects of alpine lakes don't change too drastically or speedily, but the fishing in alpine lakes can change a lot. In my experience, they're cyclical. Most of those lakes don't have natural reproduction, so they get stocked. And okay, you know, you throw a bunch of fish in there, they get big, they die off, you gotta stock it again. In my experience, you know, you go to an alpine lake, the fish are all this big, go back 3 or 4 years later, and they might all be this big. Or say you're fishing a lake and all the fish are giant, go back 4 years later and the fish aren't there or they're small. The lake kind of reset. And that's not entirely natural, that's man-made influences there, but in my experience, alpine lakes are changing and are cyclical. And the cool thing about the way the fisheries are always changing is that it gives you incentive to go back. It's not gonna be the same as it was last time. In a way, it's like fishing a new spot, which for me is fun. I don't like doing the same thing over and over all the time. So just keep that in mind, like say, oh, I used to fish this creek all the time back in the day. Go back there. It's gonna be a little bit different, I promise. All right, so we talked a little bit about how fly fishing has changed, how fisheries change. I wanna talk now about how my fishing has changed. and I'm not gonna do the whole 30 years. Let's just talk about, you know, the last 5 years or so since I've been making videos like this. Lots of things have changed in my fishing. For one, let's talk about streamer rods. For a long time, I was into like big, heavy streamer rods. I fished an 8-weight for a trout streamer rod. I have gotten away from that. I have downsized. I'm throwing 6 weights for streamer rods now. It's just a lot less work when you're casting repetitively all day long. My little arms get tired. Now I'm limiting myself a little bit with the 6-weight. I can't throw the really big articulated streamers, but I don't think it matters. I've been catching plenty of fish on the smaller streamers. So I've downsized my streamer rod. Another way that my fishing has changed, and if you watch a lot of my videos, you've probably noticed, is I hardly wade fish anymore. I have a terrible case of boat syndrome. I am in boats all the time. It's making me lazy and out of shape and fat. Not your fault, Odell, that's on me. But like these days, I think I wade fish, what, 2 or 3 times per year? I don't know, maybe a little bit more than that, but it's definitely the minority. I'm in a boat almost all the time. And it wasn't always like that. All right, how about my flies that I fish? So one example is the pheasant tail, beadhead flashback pheasant tail. 3 years ago, I would have told you that is the best nymph ever. It's the only one you need, but I've gotten away from that. The Euro guys have gotten in my head and I'm a Perdigon guy now. They're great. I'm sure they're easy to tie. I'm too lazy to do that, but they work great. Fish eat them, and I've given up the pheasant tail in favor of another pea fly, the Perdigon. And there's probably other examples of flies like that too. That's just one of them. How about the way that I fish? And the last video that I put out sort of touched on this. My dry fly strategy is changing. Again, I touched on this a little bit, but for the last several years, I've been incredibly fixated on fishing hoppers on the bank, in the grass, under the grass, as close as I can get to that bank, wanting a brown trout to come out of the grass or an undercut bank and eat that hopper. Still super cool. I think it's one of the coolest ways that I can fish, and I love it, but I have learned to don't do that all the time, man. Like, do something different. You can throw a smaller fly. You can fish it off of the bank. You can fish it in the middle of the river. The fish will still come up in 4 or 5 feet of water and eat your fly. The guides from that last trip had to sort of beat that into my head, but it's in there now. And we're at the end of dry fly season, and I'll finish out this season sort of fishing that way, but I'm pretty excited for next year so I can use these, you know, they're new tactics. It's nothing groundbreaking. It's just newish for me because it's not the way I usually do it. So I'm gonna start doing that, and you know, I'm sure that's gonna run its course someday. What's next after that? I don't know, but I'm excited to find out. All right, another way that my fishing has changed in the past few years, and I think we'll kind of bring it back full circle here, at least for me, is I've gotten back into trout fishing. I still love fishing for anything and everything, but I think the last 5 or so years, trout have been kind of an afterthought. It's my bread and butter. It's, you know, what I do all the time, but I was actively seeking out all these other opportunities and fisheries and types of fish to broaden my horizons, which I think is great. You know, see my video called Diversatility. I'll always subscribe to that philosophy, but I've gotten back into trout fishing, man. It's cool, it's fun. Sure, saltwater guys, go ahead and laugh. They're little trout, they don't fight hard. That doesn't matter. Yes, they do live in beautiful places, that's cliche, but trout fishing's pretty neat, man. There is a bit of a puzzle aspect if you're into that part of it, but for me, I just like watching the trout eat the fly. First of all, they're beautiful creatures. I remember even when I was a kid, the appeal of trout was the way they look. They're just really pretty fish, but they also have some neat behaviors. They can be total a-holes sometimes. Sometimes they're dumb as hell, but I like interacting with them and just sort of trying to get in their head. I'm in love with trout fishing again, and it's been a really fun summer of squeezing a bunch of trout, and I'm really enjoying it. And again, we'll see how long that lasts. Next year, who knows? Might be into something else. You know, I haven't caught it. And sorry about that. I got to switch to my phone. I brought 2 batteries for my GoPro, and they're both dead. All right, so moving on. Where was I? I haven't caught a carp in like a year or 2. You know, I need to get back into that. Am I going to keep trout fishing like a maniac? I don't know. You know, things are always changing, and that is really the point of this video, which I forgot to mention. This is all good. Things should change. Your fishing should change and evolve. That's how you learn. If you're doing the same thing all the time, you're just gonna stay right here. You're not gonna elevate yourself as an angler. But that's the whole point, is embrace the change, go do something different. You know, maybe it's better to not let the change happen to you. Go make the change happen to you. Seek out new things. Try new tools. Try new lines. Try your buddy's rod. Row a different boat. Go to a new place. Go back to the old place and see how it changed. This could mean a lot of stuff. And, you know, when you're doing those long drives to your fishing spot, let it roll around in there a little bit. So I think that's going to do it. You know, I've got a short drive back to my house, and I'm probably going to be thinking about this stuff. And then I'm going to go eat lunch. And then I'm going to drink another Odell. And then I'm going to edit this video. So that's going to wrap it up. Thank you, as always, for watching another one of my huge fly fisherman videos. I'll be back as soon as I can with another video, maybe tangentially related to fly fishing for you. Until then, if you see me at the boat ramp or something, don't stare at me like a creep. Say hi and stay huge. Really, I see you staring over there at me and like looking at me all weird. It's much less weird and creepy if you just say hello. I'll probably toss you a beer or something. Okay, so, all right, see you out there. Gotta go charge these batteries.